Welcome into the Action Network podcast. We are presented by BetMGM. We are here for the 2024 U.S. Open, your U.S. Open betting preview. We're joined today by Spencer Aguiar, who contributes at the Action Network, and special guest Pat Mayo of the Pat Mayo Experience. Brendan Glasheen in the host chair. We'll make our way through the card favorites, some long shots, as well as some head-to-heads, and a course breakdown, which Spencer did a great job sort of diving into this over on actionnetwork.com. If you're watching on the YouTube page, please subscribe there as well. We appreciate your visibility, and also like and subscribe to the Action Network podcast. Gents, we'll start out with just kind of an overarching look at this particular field. Spencer, I'll turn to you first. Third men's championship of the year for the U.S. Open. Some top of the line notes that come to mind for you.
Scottie Scheffler and his price. I mean, I think that has been the talking point from every single show that you're listening to, that this is the most similar to the Tiger Woods prices that we were getting in the prime of his career. And, you know, here's the thing, and here's the discussion that I think at least needs to be had here. And I'll let Pat talk about this himself. I would assume he has a similar viewpoint that I do. I mean, I don't want to speak for him here, but to me, people have been more concerned at this tournament with saying that they're going to hit the winner than actually making a long-term profit. That does not mean Scheffler is not going to win this event, but there are real ramifications to your bankroll when you have to get down double, triple, quadruple the exposure as you normally would to try to back a number that has, to me, shifted into a territory of no return. It's one thing for people when they give out recommendations and they don't track the outcome because it becomes this out of sight, out of mind situation. It's another when you have real money and real tracking of the bet if it doesn't hit. So I'm trying to figure out a way of how do we take Scottie on in the most profitable sense of the word with that. And the answer will always be other markets that are not outright bets, but people like to hear outright bets. So we'll talk about some of those here.
Well, BetMGM has the without Scheffler market, which is actually pretty fairly priced. I did not expect it to be so fairly priced. So if you're really worried about Scottie Scheffler, you can just bet on Scottie Scheffler. That is something you're allowed to do. Or you can go to that market. However, in the Scheffler market itself, so I guess the best way to think about it is, what are your goals of what you want to win in a golf tournament? Now, if I'm betting outright winners, I like to win somewhere between 6 and 9 times whatever money I put in. So if I put in $300, I need to be winning around 2,100, 2,500 coming back for myself. So how do I do that with Scottie Scheffler? Well, he's plus 333. He's basically 3-1. So my entire bankroll this week, in order for me to achieve that, would have to go on Scottie Scheffler. Now, I'm just not willing to do that. Now, I can play with the without Scottie market if I'm truly concerned about that. But the one thing that I've found, Spence, is the numbers that we're getting on some of these guys with Scottie in the field are really good compared to what we used to get them at. They're not quite as good as they should be, but when you can start getting Brooks at 24-1 or 20-1, depending on what the market bears, some of these guys down the board are still very live to win this tournament. And don't forget, for as much as Scottie Scheffler is the new Tiger Woods has 14 majors, Scottie Scheffler has 2. And it's not like this isn't the only time that Scottie Scheffler has been playing amazing golf going into a major that he didn't win. So let's pump the brakes a little bit on Scottie Scheffler until he gets to his 6, 7, 8. Then I'll say, you know what? I was wrong, but I don't think he should be this price. And I think it's helping out everyone else.
Xander Schauffele, 11-1, Rory McIlroy, 12-1. Spencer, you discussed in your write-up previewing the U.S. Open at Pinehurst Resort and Country Club that those three emerged to you. So not just Scheffler, but what do you make of the rest of the top of the board?
I seem to have this differing opinion than most people in the space when you look at this. Like, yes, Scottie Scheffler is in his own league. You can pull it from any statistical data that you want to find. I'll get into a little bit when we talk about the outright market, but like just in a nutshell of the situation there, he's gained 2.63 strokes total in my 2-year running baseline that I have. There's only one other golfer that's over 2 shots. Now, I think here's the interesting thing about if you're trying to take him on. His ball striking is so immaculate and elite. You're not going to beat him in a ball striking battle. You need to find the golfer who can be the closest with their ball striking, and that you hope that their putter gives them the ability to go nuclear with that portion of their game where Scottie ends up faltering. And there are negative trajectory marks inside of my model for him on fast Bermuda green complexes. And, you know, the putter's turned around this season and it's become closer to what we had gotten from him when he went on the run previously. And that's why you're getting all these victories when you're over a stroke better, strokes gained tee to green than the next best player in the tournament. And the putter is, oh, now it's actually good or decent. You're going to win a lot of events, but I'm trying to find the players that had the biggest ceiling outputs inside of my model in different areas. And then where was I able to find that spike potential? The putter being one of those ways that I'm going to go in that direction. I also think you can figure out a way to get an advantage if you are really good with your long iron proximity from 175 plus yards. You're going to get a disproportionate amount of strokes that are coming in that area into these really fiery, fast greens. So high apex ball flights are going to be able to hold the surface a lot better than a lot of these low ball flight players. And that's one of the things in my model where give me that sort of a blueprint, that recipe of a golfer. And those are the names that I ended up circling, trying to oppose Scottie Scheffler on the outright board.
Yeah, Pat, I heard you mention you're looking a little further down the board, but at the top, when you go right after Scottie to a Xander Schauffele or a Rory McIlroy, are those golfers that you're willing to possibly back?
No, not at that price. Like, that's the price where I would feel comfortable betting Scottie Scheffler, not these two jabronis.
Okay. Want to further explain?
I mean, yes, Xander just won. Xander, you really think Xander's going to win 2 majors in a row? This is a guy that took like 3 years to win a tournament. He's going to win 2 majors in a row? No thanks. It's been a decade for Rory at a course that completely works against what his major skill sets are. He can't just sit there and bomb at 380 yards. Maybe he can. He just hits the ball straight every single time. But I just don't see it with those two. Like, they are so much closer to the pack of 5 players behind them than they are to Scottie Scheffler at the moment. So I would just take the guys with the better odds.
Pat, I will say one thing to that. I do think there's a realistic chance that the floodgates could open for Xander.
Oh, come on.
You look at the statistical data. I mean,
that's great. I mean, he should have won, 17 times over the last 3 years, and he won once?
Look at what he's done in his personal life. Who has been the biggest problem, in my opinion, to holding him back? It was his father. His father was a very overbearing presence in a lot of these situations. Where was his father when he won the PGA championship? His father's in Hawaii, nowhere near the facility. So if the statistical outputs are putting him closer to Scottie Scheffler in this field, I made this argument on a show yesterday. Give him a victory, any victory this year. And I understand your argument. He did not have victories outside of the PGA championship, but give him any victory. He's 8 or 9 to 1 to win this tournament. And if you make it one of the headline ones of the Players Championship, I really think it's 7 or 8 to 1. This disparity difference between Scheffler and Schauffele in my eyes is not as stark of a difference here as the general public is leading people to believe. I've always been under this mentality that, look, I wrote this in an Action Network article the night before Xander won, but you are labeled as a golfer who cannot get the job done until you actually get across the finish line. And who are the players historically who have been the closest in these spots? It's the Fleetwoods, it's the Finaus, it's the Xanders. These are the names that aren't getting across the finish line, and it becomes a stink that gets put on them in the eyes of the general public. And like, I'm always going to run things from a data-driven perspective. And if there's a golfer that's going to be pumping out the statistics the way that I want them to be in it, Xander's fitting the entire bill of what I want there. I understand your sentiment that, like, you're buying into a price now that might seem gross on the surface, but I don't know, Pat. I really like Xander this week.
Who was the last guy to win back-to-back majors?
I mean, I would assume it's Tiger.
Spieth in 2015.
Chambers Bay and the
Masters.
Open.
So it's been a decade. I just don't see Xander being that guy to win back-to-back majors. Like, there's especially at this price. Now, you want to make him 25 to 1? Sure, I'll line up and bet Xander with you. I do think he has a good chance of winning. Does he have a 10% chance of winning this field? That is, I guess he's 11 to 1. So does he have a 9% chance of winning in this field? I don't think so, because I think there's a lot of randomness that goes on at this course as well. Can he navigate that? Sure. He's been great at US Opens. to come inside the top 10 and not necessarily win. Maybe you're right, in the floodgates have opened, he becomes that guy. But I would find it kind of crazy that he finally gets over the hump and then all of a sudden he's just a prolific major winner. Could he get another? Yes. Could it be the Open at Troon? Sure. But this soon seems like a stretch to me.
The randomness of the course is the exact reason why the Scheffler price is a problem too.
Correct. And that's why I like these 20 plus, 40 plus, 60 plus, similarly talented, because I did the same thing that you did when I looked at some of my bets this week here. What is the one skill that these guys have that they could actually beat everyone else in the field at? And would that be enough to actually win this week? And I do think you can find a lot of guys down the board who do that.
Okay, let's get into it then. So you're not into, you mentioned how you would use your bankroll if it was to back Scottie Scheffler, Pat Mayo, guys in your eyes that do have the appropriate price points to take a stab at.
Brooks, number one. It's a U.S. Open. There's a number 2 in front of the Brooks Koepka number. He's coming off, hey, listen, he just shot a 7 under Sunday on Live Tour. Just because you didn't know that happened doesn't mean it actually didn't happen. It happened. And this is the best U.S. Open player of our generation. Better than Tiger Woods, even, on an upside level in these events. This one's a little bit different in terms of the layout, but Brooks was 4th here a decade ago before he was Brooks Koepka. He's going to drive it straight. He's going to hit his irons high. And the biggest thing at this tournament is Brooks, I mean, the distance control for Scottie is one thing. It's very Tiger-esque where he can just hit the ball hole high every single time. What you see Brooks do at these difficult both U.S. Opens and PGA championships is monitor his ball flight and never get sucked into hitting it at the pin. There's so many guys in this field who need to have it 7 feet from the cup in order to make a birdie. Brooks doesn't. When you go back and watch Brooks majors at difficult courses, he just hits the ball to 20 feet and he just makes 3 of those putts around because he's an excellent putter. He can get the ball up and down, no problem. He has the most complete game for a U.S. Open. And if there's anyone at the top of this board who, if in contention, will keep it together, be stoic, and not make that stupid mistake, I think it's Brooks.
Pat, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Of the live golfers,
you know what? No.
Of the live golfers, is there anybody else that you like outside of Brooks?
I like Cam. I bet on Cam.
To me, I think there is a difference between Brooks and everybody else. Brooks was the most elite name in this field for all the reasons that you've talked about. We'll leave it at that. I think Brooks is a very intriguing play as that price continues to drift in the market.
I think Bryson's interesting because I think Bryson's engaged. I just don't know. He de-lofted his 7 irons. I don't know why he's doing that when you really want to hit the ball higher. And he'll still hit the ball higher than most people, even with a de-lofted club, because he'll be hitting a 7 iron 220 yards while other guys are hitting 5 irons. So naturally, it's going to be fine for Bryson. I just worry that he's going to come in with a strategy and he's going to stick to it. And that's worked out really well for him sometimes, and it's worked out really poorly for him sometimes. I could see this one being one that doesn't work out so great.
Spencer, when you use the your course breakdown, how does that factor into some of the guys towards the top of the board? Because you're very particular about how that might fit your model.
Yeah, if we look at some of the statistical data here, this is a Donald Ross course. Ross is always known for these really challenging and unique around the green complexes. A lot of times that veers away from the standard expectations of what we see on the PGA Tour weekly. That's going to be no different here. You have these turtle shell greens that have the propensity to repel shots entirely off the surface. That can be up to 30 yards away from the hole. It can move into traps, these tight lies. All of that adds a headache to the construction. All of that would be challenging on its own to try and traverse because of the complexity of the trap, or the track here. But what we end up getting, and this is how I built my model into this very heavy weight over and over again, even if I did decrease it ever so slightly in strokes gain approaches, I keep talking about these excessive number of shots from 175 plus yards into these fiery fast greens. I wanted high apex ball flights, and I wanted golfers, and Pat talked about this a little bit when he was talking about the volatility and the unpredictability of the course. You have a really fast and firm condition of when you do have a driver in hand, and it's going to move shots into sandy areas, into what they call wire grass and gorse bushes. I do think that means accuracy off the tee will be a little bit more important than distance. I would say that this is a very standard U.S. Open test yearly. We probably didn't get quite as much of that last year at LACC, but when I'm looking at the outright board and trying to figure out a way to build my card, and I did go to the very top with Xander. We've had that discussion. I thought a really nice middling point, if you're trying to find one of those middle tiered players, was Hideki Matsuyama when he opened at 55-1. That's a statistical darling if you're going to run a model. And then if I'm trying to find a long shot, and this is what I did, I think the last time we did a show together, Brendan, was at the US Open last year where I had Wyndham Clark at 100-1. You're trying to find a specific skill set of why does this player overachieve their baseline projection on the given track that's being used. And that is how you end up landing in these positions where you can get players that overachieve based off of their baseline projection. Wyndham did that last year. Top 10 of my model for weighted strokes gained total, expected scoring, firm conditions, projected scoring on fast tracks. Like all of those things hit for him. I think I gave this exact answer, and Matt Mitchell even commented on it after the fact on it, but I gave something along the lines of like, you're asking for him to do something that he's never done in his career to get the victory, and Wyndham was able to do that. There is a golfer for me in this field, and I know he doesn't necessarily have that pedigree because at least Wyndham had that victory at the Wells Fargo Championship, but I really like Min-Woo Lee in the same vein of why I liked Wyndham Clark last year. There were a few extremely robust returns for me here at Pinehurst that resembled what I saw from Clark. He graded 5th in this field when combining long iron proximity plus around the green production. Those are the two stats I keep going back to. 3rd for expected total driving, and then 5th for weighted strokes gained total. That last stat of landing 5th for weighted strokes gained total is the fun one that starts to mimic Clark's 7th place grade in 2023. I keep talking about overachieving your baseline. Clark was 20 spots above his baseline last year. Min-Woo Lee is 34 spots above his here, specifically at Pinehurst. So, there are options. This is not, and this is where Pat's correct, this is not just the foregone conclusion Scottie Scheffler is going to guarantee to win this event. It's still hard to win a golf tournament. It's hard to win a 156-man field, and it's hard to win a course that's going to have volatility where 1 or 2 bad shots can change the complete complexion of this event. So there are opportunities down this board to take a few shots.
Okay. Yeah, weather looks picture perfect for the weekend too at Pinehurst. So that's something to think about too. An extremely dried out course could be the case this weekend down in North Carolina. Let's go to head-to-head markets, and then we'll work our way to long shots. Pat Mayo, anything emerged to you from a head-to-head standpoint?
Yeah, I'm taking the guy that has finished inside the top 4 in each of his past 3 starts, has finished inside the top 5 of each of the majors so far this season, a guy I bet on to win this tournament, and he's against Xander Schauffele, and he's an underdog. Xander, despite his great run that he's currently on, including a major championship, has lost to Collin Morikawa in 4 of his past 6 starts. So you can find Collin Morikawa over Xander Schauffele at plus 110 right now across the market. So that's where I would be going.
Well, the Xander slamming continues.
I mean, he just doesn't beat Morikawa.
It's a good percentage, 4 out of 6, 2 out of
3. 67% winner, and you're getting juiced up odds. 100 pays $110 on that. Not even just your money back in terms of the bet that you wager. You have to, and it's juiced so badly to the other side because people are in love with Xander that it's minus 140. And these guys are so close right now because all of a sudden, and I mean, what Spencer said is true because sometimes it depends on what you look at when people do data modeling. There's different ways to do that. So Spencer's using a 2-year running average, and that should probably actually make Morikawa a little bit better than if you had used, let's say, the past 6 months or so because his iron play had been so bad. However, over the past 3 starts for Morikawa, the former best iron player in the world has not quite rediscovered everything that he's done with his irons in terms of gaining 8 strokes a tournament, 9 strokes a tournament. However, he's back to gaining 4, 5 per tournament, which is fine because he learned how to chip and putt. He doesn't actively chip and putt himself out of tournaments anymore. And that is exactly what you need to win a US Open. He has been my favorite guy this week. I think his odds are 15-1 right now. But almost any site that you use will give you a profit boost this week. And there is no better place to use a profit boost than on a golf winner, especially someone somewhat near the top. So earlier in the week, you were able to take him. I was able to take him up from 17-1 to 26-1. You can probably get him at least up to 24, 23-1 with boosts at any place where you want to play. So I would be going back to Morikawa outright. And if I'm going to bet him outright, I'm going to bet him over Xander Schauffele.
Spencer, head-to-head market that you're interested in?
There were two for me that I liked. Christian Bezadenhout -120 over Adam Hadwin. That's a wager that's the epitome of the conversation I have frequently on Links and Locks about how market overcorrections are one of the most significant leaks you can still take advantage of weekly when trying to find value on the board. That's going to include, and we'll talk about this throughout the week as I write articles for Action, but the in-tournament wagers where options move way too heavily away from their pre-event numbers. It's one of the reasons my matchups have hit at over 60% over the last 500 plays on the Thursday, Friday, and Saturday plays. As I said, you can be sure to check those out, Brendan. I'm not above a shameless plug there, but many of those sentiments also become highly relevant in these full tournament matchups, since you can get these price shifts away from the long-term projections that lead to the same outlook disparity that sometimes generates these skewed prices between golfers. My model graded Hadwin 108th in anticipated strokes gained off the tee compared to the field. He also fell to 67th from his 45th place baseline when looking into around the green projections. A lot of this boost of what we're getting here is his third place result at the Memorial. I thought that was a very enticing price that has been on the move in the market. You're going to have to shop around there. I wrote this over at Rotoballer on Monday on one of the sites. We moved the number 30 points, and that 120 is still available if you shop around. But the other one is Minwoo Lee -114 over Sepp Straka. Straka was a golfer that I backed at the Memorial last week because of this recent top 10 upside. But that disproportionate number of shots from outside of 175 plus yards that I keep talking about hurt his profile more than most names in this field. My model ranks Straka 89th when combining long iron proximity plus around the green, 75th for weighted bogey avoidance, 88th for weighted scoring, and then 74th for expected strokes gained total at Pinehurst #2. If we want to have a DFS discussion, he's going to be the chalk of all chalk there. I tend to think that the price tag is kind of fair, which is going to be, I am much lower than consensus for that reason. And I'm trying to find different ways to fade him. I wrote a round one article that you can find on Action. And this is going back to the well with the Wyndham Clark thing that everybody wants no part of Wyndham this week. I took Wyndham in round one over Straka. Like, I think there's a lot of different ways that we can consider opposing him. And that's one of those situations where I don't think he's the market overcorrection answer that Hadwin would be, because Straka does have a profile that's been trending positively in my model. But this is one of those situations where, because he has the safety built into the profile of what he's done recently, a lot of this is being overblown on the odds board here at a course that I don't necessarily think fits his game perfectly.
Funny you mentioned Seb Straka. I wouldn't play that Minwoo against him, only because Minwoo doesn't rate out very well for me either. It's starting to get a little bit better, but his horrendous start to the season, and where he was so smoke and mirrors towards the earlier part of last year when he was having so much success based primarily off his chipping and his putting. And then the irons just never really came around. They do seem like they're coming around a little bit right now. He just hasn't been able to hit that upside elsewhere. Maybe baked out sand-infused courses, that's where you'd want to go. But in my short-term modeling, and I think about power rankings for this week, Seb Straka comes in at 5th. This is what happens when you have 4 top 10s in your past 5 starts. His only miscut, PGA Championship, the last major that we had. However, in the course fit rankings that I do, he is 103rd in this field. So my numbers are telling me exactly the same things that Spencer's are. And I think the way that you want to play this, if you can shop around for the best number, plus 163, I think is the best number on the market right now. Let me confirm that for you, Glash. I will see. To make the cut, to miss the cut. If we can wager on Seb Straka to miss the cut, we will get, where are you at here, Seb Straka? Yeah, plus 167 at BetMGM is the best number on the market right now. I think that's the way that you want to try to take advantage of this. This is the hardest cut in golf to make.
One of the hardest courses to play, the hardest tournaments to play, period. Let's go to long shots. Pat Mayo. Why don't you get us started, please?
I mean, my long shot is the fact that you have developed this like crazy announcer's voice over the past 5 years. It is unbelievable. You don't sound like the same person, Glash.
Well, I've grown up a little bit, Pat.
I don't know. You're not the same age as me.
No, but I've grown up a bit. That's all.
I mean, you're like, you sound like, I mean, you do the play-by-play for all of these teams. So I would expect to tune into a game and hear someone like you talking with that voice. But it's shocking to me to hear it at this point. What happened to loose fun guy? Now you're like super serious voice mad.
I'm not mad. I'm just trying to keep the train on the tracks. So,
oh yeah, but you invited me. How is that ever going to happen?
Should have known better when I knew you were coming on this podcast.
Long shots. So it depends on how long you want to get. Leave it at that. Cam Smith and Hideki Matsuyama are two that I am going with from that. What I would consider mid-tier, I think that anyone who doesn't bet on golf normally would consider 40-1 and 55-1 to be pretty large bets. But in golf, it's kind of in that middle range. But the reason that I'm doing that is because I like to play a lot of bets with placements, which means that is 2 bets for those keeping track at home or who are interested in that. Meaning that if I bet $100 on, let's just call it, make it something very easy. Let's use Cam Smith as an example. 40-1 on Cam Smith, I wager $100. 50 of those dollars goes to his outright win at 40-1, which would return $2,000. Another $50 would go to whatever his placement is. And there's a myriad of different ways that you can make placements. You can play a top 3, a top 5, a top 8, a top 12, whatever it might be. I took 8 places. So 50 of my dollars goes towards a top 8 finish as well at 1/5 the odds. So you do the quick math on that. What's that? 8. So you'd have 8-1 for a top 8 finish at 50. So you're looking at what, $400 on that? No, do I have that right? Yeah. So $400 on that. If he comes inside the top 8, it's a great way that if you really do that, if you want to have that upside of a winning golfer. Now, if they hit both, you win $2,400. So just keep that in mind. But it's a nice way to try to return some of your profits for your outright stakes if Scheffler goes and beats the crap out of everyone this week. So I did the same thing with Cam Smith, the 8 places. I did the same thing with Hideki. So an even larger payout. He's 11.25-1 to come inside the top 8, along with his 55-1. There's no better player at U.S. Opens in terms of strokes gained approach over the past 5 years than Hideki. He had only played twice, the Masters and PGA Championship, until last week over the past 2.5 months. And he looked good last week. He looked like the Hideki who was the second best player in the world, or at least on the PGA Tour, to Scottie Scheffler earlier this season before he had his weird neck injury and just kind of disappeared back to Japan for a while. Now he's back and ready to at least try to make us some money at the U.S. Open. Then we can keep going down. Real long shots. See, woo, Kim, 100-1, 8 places. The Zadenhout, who Spencer mentioned already, 110-1 with 8 places. So those would be the 6 I was going with. And if you really want to get freaky, you can take yourself some Taylor Moore, 300-1, and you can play that with 12 places if you want to. And all of these pay 1/5 in terms of the placement along with the outright win. So I know it's a bit complicated for people who don't play golf normally, but in tournaments like this, it's a great way to get your money because every single sports book out there is going to increase. Usually is a top 5 or a top 6 where you get your placement. At major championships, it's 8 places or 10 places for exactly the same price. The way I would try to think about it is you can play a top 8 right now. We can use that Cam Smith one. Again, so you have to bet him to win outright at 40-1, but you get 8-1 for a top 8 finish. To bet Cam Smith at top 10 at the moment, this is the way that I like to think about it and why I think that the placement bet is better. That if we go to the top finishes and we look at top 10 odds for Cam Smith's top 10 odds are plus 375. So if I wager $100 on Cameron Smith to come inside the top 10, I win $350. If I wager $100, 50 on his win and 50 on his top 8, I have the potential to win $2,400. However, if he just comes inside the top 8, you give up 2 placement points, but you win $400 on top of that. So it's basically you give up 2 points for better odds on a top 10 with all of the upside of a player winning. That would be the best way that I can try to Did you get that, Clash? I don't know if you're into each way betting or not. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I wish I had a pen. But that's why I'll go back and listen and stop, pause, begin. So
people ask me all the time, if you just Google each way betting golf, it has like the Wikipedia description, much more concise than what I just laid out. But I wanted to give you the reason why I think, especially during major season, sportsbooks will give you better odds on a lot of these things. And finding little niches like this in the golf market are where you want to go. Like it didn't happen this time around, but there are some weird head-to-heads out there from like the Masters. I think it was like Herman versus Akshay. in a head-to-head, but they were also facing each other in the top left-handed player market, and the odds were just completely different. So if you found the market that you liked better just by clicking through everything, you got to spend a little bit of time searching around, but sometimes you can find odds that are at odds with one another. And if there's one side that you really like, you can get better odds on that because they just offer, every sportsbook offers so many bets during major weeks that they just can't keep track of them all.
Excellent. Pat, all kidding aside, that's good stuff and good advice, I think, for folks that might be tuning in and just are interested in these major championships to get involved in. Spencer, long shots for you that you're eyeing.
I mean, it's probably the two that I've talked about so far. I agree with everything of what Pat said with Hideki Matsuyama. You look at what he's done with his approach play at the US Open. He is consistently gaining 5+ strokes to the field with that area of his game. You add that to being one of the best around the green players in the world. This course plays very well for him. He had an increase in projected production in off the tee. It wasn't a massive total, but it was enough to really move him into being a value. I talked about Minwoo Lee already, and then I always run my model to just try to figure out what players in the field grade inside a certain percentage. So for me this week, what players graded inside of the top 50 of every single category that I ran. And there were 4 of the 15 players that ended up doing that if you search around on the odds board, some of these I like more than others, and we've seen some movement around some of these prices, but there were 4 of them that are 80 or above on the odds slate. So that was Ben On. Ben On has been a very sharp mover this week. Sungjae Im, Minwoo Lee. Pat talked about Siwoo Kim. I always can get behind a little Siwoo Kim action.
Do you think that might just be that a lot of these sharp bettors are in South Korea?
I mean, it sounds like that, I guess. At least it might be a lot of the big money bets that are coming in. Maybe it's not even sharp based off of that. It's like the big whales that are just coming in, and you see it in the local Baccarat games in Las Vegas. You go there and you just have millions of dollars on the table.
It's funny. I bet on Siwoo, but Siwoo and Minwoo have suffered from very similar fates this year Siwoo especially cannot putt, which is a real problem. But I bet on him anyway, just in case this is the one week he does putt, because the rest of his game, if you just took putting out of the equation, Spencer, how highly up do you think that Siwoo would rate? Top 10, top 5?
Even adding putting to the equation for me, he is right around the top 20. When you ran this from a statistical perspective, he's a top 15 win equity candidate. That's including a pretty decent amount of putting in my model. So the ball striking would put him inside of the top 10, 100%.
And think about Glash, you know this, because I know you know so much about Siwoo Kim, but played Donald Ross courses very well throughout the course of his career, played Pete Dye courses very well throughout the course of his career. The only place where he has won in his 5 wins that actually has rough built up around the green was at a Donald Ross course at the Wyndham Championship. Everywhere else where he's played his best golf has all of these runoff areas, just like you have at Pinehurst. So I would expect his around the green to be very good this week. So if he can just chip it closer than everyone else, then hell, maybe he can make a 4-foot putt. I am betting on the fact that he could make a 4-foot putt, but it might not be a great bet. We'll see.
I have a weighted tee to green outlook in my model that's geared specifically towards Pinehurst. So that would be removing putting from the equation. And it's only taking off the tee approach and around the green there. It's not taking all the other categories that would matter. But number 1, Scottie. Number 2, Hideki. Number 3, Siwoo Kim. So that kind of shows where Siwoo's at if he could just ever make a putt.
So I ran a very similar type of thing just for Pinehurst specifically. And while it doesn't have putting isolated in it, it does have stats that include putting just at different styles of courses, firm and fast, difficult to hold greens, super fast greens, like all of that's going to come into play. Even when you do scrambling percentage or strokes gained total, putting is going to be a factor in that. So it did hurt Siwoo a little bit, but he ended up rating out 7th of every player in this field, with Scottie, Xander, Fleetwood, Hideki, Rory being the top 5. And then Dustin Johnson.
My model like Dustin Johnson also. And maybe that's some of the Fantasy National stuff that I pulled. So shout out to Fantasy National there. But Dustin graded well on my model. And you think of where Dustin has always found success. It's at these prototypical US Open type venues. I don't know where his game is specifically at right now compared to some of those other iterations, but the math did like him on my end too.
It's really strange because he missed. I think at that the Masters just really sticks out in people's mind. That he had a bad Open Championship, sure, but he was especially bad at the Masters. Like, he was okay at the PGA Championship. He was top 10 at the US Open last year. So I think in the short term, it looks really bad. Obviously, he's a prolific US Open player over the years. You know, the amount of top 10s, the win that he had, I guess it was in 2017 now, 2016? Yeah, 2016, because he lost. He came in second to Spieth at Chambers Bay and then won the next year, outlasting Shane Lowry in 2016 at Oakmont. But I just worry that he retired from golf a year and a half ago and just didn't tell anyone.
All right, let's wrap this up. Let's do some outrights, then we'll get out of here. Pat Mayo, some outrights, best bets, final bets, and we'll get out of here.
Okay, so the 6 I'm going with, we'll call Mayo 6. And if you need to know more about this and you listen to this in time, I'm going to be live on the Mayo Media Network YouTube channel at 8 p.m. Eastern time on YouTube. You follow me at the PME on X, formerly known as the Twitters, and you will find the direct link there. But if you're looking for it and you have questions, you can come to me. I'll probably yell at you through the camera, but that's okay.
No, not you.
I can't physically hurt you. As Glass knows, I can only emotionally hurt you.
You still yell at people? That's still your
I still
one of your strategies.
If people come on to my chat and they ask stupid questions, they get launched immediately.
Do you block people still on YouTube?
Oh yeah. You know what people love when they're watching? Me yelling at not them.
It's true. If you're not the one being yelled at, it can be quite entertaining.
There you go. Don't ask the stupid question. Don't be afraid to ask a stupid question because it will create great entertainment for my show. The 6 that I'm going with this week, which all actually add up to be less than what I would have to wager on Scottie Scheffler to win the same amount of money, which is crazy to think about. Colin Morikawa, you can bet him at 17-1. I used a boost on him to get him up to 26-1, but I would still bet him at 17. If that was the case, I think that he's going to win this week. Brooks Koepka, 25-1, still lingering out there. 20 in most spots you can find at 25. Love Brooks. Cam Smith, 40-1 with the 8 places that I talked about. Hideki Matsuyama, 55-1 with the 8 places that I talked about. Ditto 8 places with Kim at 100-1 and Christian Bezadenhout at 110-1. And I said, if you want to get real crazy, Taylor Moore is out there at 300-1. You probably never heard of him. And frankly, at 300-1, you probably never will. But what if he wins? 300-1, Spencer. Wouldn't that be great?
That's the dream.
All right,
top
Spence,
20s in both majors so far.
My outright card, I am going to go to Xander. I think 11-1 is the very cutoff point of where I'm still willing to get to that number. Minwoo in the 80s is a great price. You might be able to shop around and find a little bit better there. I'm with Pat on Hideki at 55-1. And if you want to get really aggressive with your card, and this is still going to be less than a Scottie wager, I also like Rory McIlroy. Those are the 2 guys for me at the very top of the board that can compete with him with some of their flat stick stuff. And then the 2 head-to-head bets, fades of Straka in general. I like what Pat talked about of potentially betting him to miss the cut. You know, a Minwoo lead ticket is one way to go, but one of the things I always do in the head-to-head market is I'm finding players I want to fade versus ones that I'm technically trying to back. So there are a lot of options out there that are going to make sense for me of routes to fade Sepp Straka. And then I do like Bezadenhout over Hadwin at -120.
All right, gentlemen, I think you both ran out of shameless plugs. You partly did my job because I was going to ask you, Pat, where you'd be. 8 o'clock Eastern, the night of June 12th. Is that right?
On Mayo Media Network, talking all things U.S. Open. And if you have tons of time on your hands and you really want to dig in, check out the Pat Mayo Experience podcast. You can go to Mayo Media Network for the video or just type in the PME, it'll pop up, or you can get the audio versions. We've had 5 shows already this week and everything that you want to know about a show player by player, breaking down their stats and potential, a course research show where we really dig in to both how it's going to play with visuals and stats, another show where we're goofing around and making bets, the best bets of the week, plus all the updated info like John Rahm not playing in this tournament, which no one really seems to care about.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that with Rahm. That came out yesterday. So he's out with the injury concern. And Spencer, thank you. Follow along for Spencer Aguiar. More content from him at actionnetwork.com. Also, Links and Locks podcast. Okay, very good. Pat, thanks for being here. This was fun.
Thanks for having me on. Great times.
Yep. I'm going to work on that voice and get more fun for you next time.
Well, I mean, it's so good now. I wouldn't change it for the world.
Oh,
like,
it's
maybe
good.
Like,
you're saying it was bad before. Okay.
I'm saying it's just so much different. We used to have like good time, party time, fun times here, yucking it up. You sound like you could be a news broadcaster. Now, like, you could be, I mean, I don't want to say that you could be Walter Cronkite, but maybe you could. With that, if you started smoking like 2 packs a day, you could be Walter Cronkite, is what I'm saying.
All right. Well, I'm going to go buy a pack of Marlboro Reds.
There you go. Get them in you. Why do you think my voice sounds like this?
Pat Mayo of the Pat Mayo Experience. Thanks for stopping by. Spencer Aguiar of the Action Network. Brendan Glasheen. Thanks for everyone tuning into the Action Network podcast. We are presented by BetMGM. Best of luck. Enjoy the U.S. Open.